All right, so first speaking will be Tony Prince, legal counsel of Teamsters 705. Tony, please.
Again, my name is Anthony Prince. I'm the one of the attorneys that works for Teamsters Local 705 in Chicago. And I wanted to first of all thank Bill Bianchi and the PDA for inviting me to participate in this panel. I can't think of a more exciting time to be part of a movement such as PDA, and I'll try to address some of the specifics of that in a moment. But I think we are definitely at a very important historic crossroads in battling for the kind of things that workers and labor have traditionally been interested in against the corporations which are doing everything they can to dominate the Democratic Party and to dominate all the institutions and political apparatuses in their interests. So I think an organization like PDA that's organizing the fight to restore and put back on the front burner the concerns of the working people and the progressive, historically progressive things that the Democrats at one time stood for, I think is critical to going forward. So it's a pleasure to be here. I also wanted to thank Bill and Mike for that excellent tour. And you know, I'm a very strong believer in studying history. I think you cannot understand where you are, let alone where you need to go, if you don't know where you've been. You know the old story of you see the guy running down the street, buck naked, waving his arms, screaming like a maniac, and you say, well, that guy's nuts. But then you find out his house is on fire. And so you understand, you know, the present. You understand the present is tied to the past. And I think similarly that we are not going to be able to understand where we find ourselves and where we need to go unless we look at history. I was struck in particular by the reference that Mike made during the tour to the school. He talked about the fact that if you worked for Pullman, which was this planned community, during a time when I think George Pullman and to some extent capitalism as an economic system had a more paternalistic attitude towards its workers for the most part. And I guess you could go to the school, the Pullman school, if you worked at Pullman. And Mike was pointing out that one of the reasons for that, in addition to creating, having a cultured or a little bit more of an educated community, was to have an educated workforce, to have people who could go into work for Pullman and bring with them the science and the mathematics and the language skills and the reading skills that would be necessary, especially the skilled tradespersons. And I think that today we have a very different situation, because if we look around us on a broader scale, public education is being absolutely destroyed. I mean, it almost brings me to tears to read in the papers how these children are crowded into hallways. There are school districts where classes are being conducted in bathrooms, in cloakrooms, in closets, janitors' closets. And, you know, but if you step back and look at it, you can see that we're at a point, I think, in the development of technology and industry and production and society where they don't need to educate people anymore. Before I became an attorney, I was a millwright for U.S. Steel down here on the far south side. And I remember we would go up there and repair these mud guns and tap hole drills and other things we used up on the blast furnace and take them out, take them to the shop and break them down and repair them and change out the gears and change out the shafts and grind down the bearings. Well, they don't do that anymore. They don't need to do that. I mean, all you need to do is pull out a part, put in another part. They're making more steel over here at the Gary Works over in Indiana with 5,000 fewer workers than they were when that mill had 15,000 people because of the level of technology. So they don't need an education system, and they're throwing the kids out because they're just no longer needed. A whole generation. And so I think as contradistinct to the situation that we learned about on this tour, where this housing was provided and education was provided, I think we're into a period now where there's just absolute disregard for the next generation in particular, because they're just not needed. They're a superfluous group. They are able to make goods and products, and in some cases deliver services with a fraction of the human labor that at one time was required. I know that this had a huge impact on the trade union movement. When I was in the Steelworkers Union, we had 1.3 million members. We're down to, I think the USWA now has 200,000 members tops. I mean, that's a loss of over 1 million people in the steel industry. The UAW, our own union, the Teamsters, we one time had 2 million members. We're down to a little bit over 1 million. That's a 50% cut in the number of people. And of course, Teamsters are not just truck drivers. Teamsters traditionally, and always have been, also in factories and even in hospitals and other small, what we call bucket shops and things of that nature. So it's had a huge impact, and I also think it's had a ripple impact. The fact that so many people are permanently discharged out of the traditional base of the trade unions, that is the industrial production sector. I mean, because when you have people, you go to my old neighborhood, I have 5 generations of the Prince family from South Chicago, and the mill no longer exists. That's another contrast I saw between this neighborhood where people fought, and there's a tribute to them to fight to preserve this neighborhood and hang on to these homes and everything else. Well, I'll tell you, in 1977, 78, when they announced that South Works was going to close, and they closed Wisconsin Steel, and they started systematically shutting down these mills, we were hit like with a ton of bricks. You go to my neighborhood now, my old neighborhood now, and it looks like Detroit. 80% of the homes are boarded up. The school, Bowen High School, which was just one of the best Chicago public schools at one time, is just gang infested and drug infested. They haven't had a Christmas Day parade for the kids in 15 years, almost 20 years. And as I say, these are thrown away workers, thrown away generation, and thrown away communities. So I think the issue here about labor and community is that the distinction between what's a labor struggle, what's a community struggle, is really we're starting to see the merger of these things in a real way. And I think that the union movement needs to be mindful of these changes. They can't act, and they're not acting like it's the old days. Some real, I think dramatic changes are taking place within the trade unions, and I'm glad to be a part of that change. If I could just give one example, we had just last year actually, 2010, we had a situation with the Teamsters with our UPS employees, where United Parcel Service announced that pursuant to federal regulations, they were going to re-verify. I'm sure you're familiar with the E-Verify system now, where employers are obligated to check on the citizenship status of their employees. Well, UPS was only too happy to oblige and fired hundreds of workers. We have 90 of them that we're pursuing grievances and arbitrations for now. And UPS saw it as an opportunity to get rid of some of its more senior workers. All kinds of people were caught up in this witch hunt, mandated by the federal government, but UPS only too happy to support it. Well, we worked very closely with the immigrant rights community, with some of the organizations that have been fighting against these terrible measures, police state measures they're taking against undocumented workers. And I think we had picket lines, we had protests, and we're still fighting that battle. But we made it clear to the community that labor and the community have a commonality of interests here. So it's from that standpoint that I think that we need to go forward from this point on.
Thank you.